It's been more than 6 months since the end of the Gulf War, but the war is still raging in the oil fields of Kuwait. Fires continue to burn out of control at hundreds of the wells set ablaze by Saddam Hussein's army. Only about 200 of the 732 burning wells have been capped. Each day, the remaining wells spew an estimated 2 million tons of carbon dioxide and 5,000 tons of soot into the murky air over the desert emirate. Although summer winds have blown much of the smoke south across the Gulf, scientists say that winter winds could drive the polluted air back to hang over Kuwait City as it did this spring. For an update on the Gulf War's continuing environmental impacts, we're joined now by Professor Farouk El-Baz. He's director of Boston University's Center for Remote Sensing. Welcome back. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Good to see you.
200 wells out of 732 doesn't sound like very many. Are they making good headway in capping the wells?
That's true. Does not sound like very many. And also we should add that they started with the easy wells. There are some very large wells now that they will have to handle later. But right now, at least, they have many more teams working on the oil fires. At the time, they only had 4, and then became 8, and then became 12. And today, there are 28 teams working separately to try to cap the wells.
How international is the cooperation of these teams that are in Kuwait?
It was not international before. There were only 3 companies from the US and 1 company from Canada. These are the people that really had experience in capping burning oil wells. But now they have opened the gates, and there are Japanese, there are Russians, there is Chinese, there are Iranians, there are Egyptians, everybody's there now.
With all these teams, the international cooperation to put out the fires at the wells, what is the time frame they're looking ahead to?
The oil minister of Kuwait assumed that they could continue the rate at which they are capping the wells now, and if this happens, they will be through the whole thing in next March, the March of 1992.
Does that sound like wishful thinking to you?
I think it's a little bit of wishful thinking. I think we're going to go through another summer.
Tell me about the effects. As the oil wells continue to burn, the smoke and the soot keeps pouring out. What have been the effects of all of this air pollution on the people living there in the region?
Vast effects, and actually in addition to the oil and soot itself, there are also poisonous gases, noxious gases, that come out of the burning process, in addition to the fact that the burning process was not very efficient, and there is a great deal of oil that comes out as particles in the air. So it is deposited on people, on animals, and on plants in the form of oil, and that is a real danger.
We've been seeing video showing people gathering water in Kuwait. Have the burning oil wells or the oil spills in the area been polluting the water supply?
Yes, they polluted the intakes of the desalination plants. So for a long time, there was no way to drink clean water in Kuwait. So all of it had to be actually imported by barges. And but now they are beginning to clear up the area in front of the intakes of the desalination plants so they can function again.
What about the impact of all of this pollution, the noxious gases that have been released, the soot, the oil in the ground, on the animals, the wildlife of the region?
It is a huge effect on the wildlife and the animals and the plants, because the animals have been affected when they slaughter sheep. They find their lungs black with soot. They find some of their lungs have a little growth on top of them already. People that are coughing, and there are all kinds of asthma cases and some bronchitis and so on in people, but also on the plants, the same effects are even more dangerous, because the plants die instantaneously when the leaves are covered by soot and oil, and they no longer get the sun rays, so they do not do the photosynthesis that they need to live, and the plants just die.
What about plants and animals out in the water of the Persian Gulf itself? Are they badly affected?
This is another cause altogether, and it really is a very bad situation, because these are the animals and the plants that die quietly. We don't see them. For instance, we see the birds as they are affected by the oil spill and so on, but much of the marine life of the Gulf just dies quietly. We don't see them because the microscopic plants that actually form the first chain in the food chain of the fish.
What about the fish themselves?
And the fish themselves, a great deal of the fisheries have been destroyed. I remember distinctly that in 1983, after one oil spill that was caused by the war between Iran and Iraq, 15% of the shrimp fisheries were totally destroyed. So this one here is going to cause a lot more than that.
You were mentioning the birds, which obviously feed off the fish in the Persian Gulf. Is this something that has broader impacts beyond the region right there, around Kuwait and Iraq and Saudi Arabia? Do birds migrate in who winter and spend the summer in the Soviet Union? Or?
Very much so. Actually, it's the reverse. Most of the birds that have been affected, or a great deal of the birds that have been affected in Kuwait, have migrated from Siberia. So they are really Russian birds that came in to winter in the Gulf. So that has a great deal of effect worldwide.
Talking about worldwide effect, and not just the birds, we were saying earlier that this pollution has been blown by the wind. How far away does the soot and the smoke from the burning oil wells travel?
It can travel vast distances if it comes very high in the atmosphere. Some oil and soot has been already found in Hawaii, and we hear from the Indian scientists, colleagues of ours in the Himalayas, picking up a great deal of soot and oil from the oil fires. And the oil now, or the oil fires now, have been sending in all of this material southward into the eastern part of the Arabian Peninsula, so they now get this in the United Arab Emirates and Oman and the Indian Ocean.
Can all of this, this added pollution in the air, have an impact on the climate of the region?
Very much so, and the effects on the climate of the region can also have an effect on the other climates, because the air is an open system, and things move around, affect other systems. So the effect of the monsoon over the Indian Ocean might affect other systems, which can push other systems all the way to the El Nino, which affects much of the weather in the United States. So these systems are definitely connected, and some movement of one can affect the rest.
So we really are only just scratching the surface in our discussion about the impacts of the Gulf War on global environment.
Very much so, and we're just beginning really to learn what is it that we should be monitoring in the months and years ahead.
Farouk El-Baz, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And When Norway Street returns after this break.